welcome to The Kink Perspective. My name is Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, we're going to be talking about what happens when your body starts reaching for connection before you feel your mind is ready for it. If you've read my recent writing, the one I put out yesterday, Connection Before Safety, you know what I'm going to be talking about today. The strange split that shows up after loss or betrayal when one part of you craves closeness and the other is already bracing for pain. I want to unpack what's going on underneath all of that, why the attachment system keeps reaching for contact even when you know it might hurt, why grief and desire show up together, and why betrayal hits differently than death. Because the real threat here is that all of this stays alive in your memory. This isn't about weakness or poor judgment, mind you. It's about how the nervous system tries to regulate itself through touch, familiarity, and even connection. The goal isn't to shut that down or even shame it. It's to understand it, to slow it down, to listen, and not be afraid to figure out what it's saying or letting it take over. So before we dive in, I want to do as I always do every week. I want to thank all of you who have been following along, reaching out after episodes, contacting me. I've had some new people. Yes, I want to shout out to you. From, of all places, thank you, Moscow. I did hear you. I'm cheering for you. I hope your fall festival goes well. You'll know the person I'm speaking to. Mexico City and a couple of other places. Real quick, I just want to name thank you to all of you, right? All of you are what keeps this show going forward. So if you're new here, if you've been following me for a while on Spotify or YouTube, so you don't miss what's next, hit the like, subscribe button, rate the show if you're on Spotify for me, hit that 5 stars. This allows others to find this show, keeps these conversations moving forward, right? You maybe share an episode with them, right? And if you'd like to support the work I do, you're going to find a donation link in the show's notes or in the episode in the show's description. Sorry, I'm still a little bit recovering today from being sick, right? But every little bit helps me keep these conversations going. And I want to make something really clear because a lot of people think, oh, that's all I'm doing this for. I support the show myself. I do all my own recording. I do my editing. I've paid for my equipment. I've never had anybody like on a lot of other podcasters in the kink community, not every one of them, but others who basically exploit people to get them to buy equipment. I don't do that. I bought this all myself. I do it all myself. But anyways, enough on that. Let's get into today's topic. So the first thing I want to talk about is the body's reflex to connect. So when we talk about grief and when we talk about attachment here, it's easy to think of them as two separate entities. You lose something, you grieve, and only after you've done that work do you start to reconnect. But that's not actually how people function. The body doesn't wait for permission to look for safety again. It starts scanning actually almost immediately. And that's what I wrote about yesterday in the connection before safety. That's really what the core of the writing is. The mind wants logic and order, but the body wants regulation. So it goes searching for it in the ways it knows how to. Attachment is a survival system here. It's not a personality trait or a relationship skill. It's built into the nervous system to keep us connected to the people who help us survive through it. Now, when that connection breaks through betrayal or abandonment or death, the body interprets it as a threat to stability. The attachment circuit doesn't shut down just because someone is gone or becomes unsafe. It keeps trying to reestablish that balance. That's why grief and attachment are always intertwined. Grief is the pain of the attachment system trying to reconnect when the person it's bonded to isn't there anymore. This is why it all can feel confusing after a major loss or even betrayal. One part of you wants contact, and the other part is terrified of becoming hurt again or even deeper. You'll be sitting there and telling yourself, I know I should stay back, and still feel pulled towards a text, a memory, a photo, or a person isn't good for you. And there's actually a person in mind that I was helping in these past couple of months, not working with them, but offering in some advice that I really think you should listen to, especially with today. Because none of what I'm talking about today it's not about weakness. This is your biology. The body wants to restore what feels familiar. Because guess what? Familiar once meant safe. The mind has a completely different job. It's trying to keep you out of danger. It remembers how the loss happened, how bad it felt, and it starts setting up protective rules and boundaries. The inner split begins here. The body wants comfort, the mind wants control. Now, both are doing their best to keep you alive. They're just doing it in different ways. And you can see this in small, ordinary moments. Think about how many people after the breakup scroll through old messages or check social media even when they know it's going to hurt. For a few seconds, it gives a sense of contact, of closeness, even regulation. But guess what? The guilt or the panic kicks in right after that, and you're going to pull back again. That push and pull is the attachment system and the protective system colliding head on. It's not that someone doesn't know better, it's that their body and their mind are operating on different timelines. The same thing happens after a betrayal. The attachment bond doesn't dissolve just because the person broke trust. The body still registers them as a source of safety, even when the mind knows they're not. It takes time and repetition for the nervous system to relearn what safety actually means without that person. That's why you can understand logically that it's over, but you still feel drawn towards that person. The system hasn't caught up to you yet. It's waiting, it's analyzing, it's processing. And when I work with people, I see this constantly. I have clients tell me, I don't even like them anymore. So why do I still care? What they're really describing to me is a body still trying to regulate through an old connection. It's not romantic longing, it's nervous system confusion. The same mechanism that bonds a child to a caregiver or a partner to another is still firing, trying to do its job. Now, if you start looking at it that way, it changes how you view healing. Instead of asking, why can't I move on? You start asking, what is my body trying to do right now? That's the shift where self-compassion starts. And we tend to forget about that in these moments. So we have to look after ourselves. Now, you're not broken for wanting closeness after the pain. You're responding exactly how humans are wired to. The work isn't just to shut off that reflex, it's to recognize it and to learn how to slow it down. So when the body wants connection and the mind wants safety, you don't have to choose one side. You just have to give both enough room to be heard internally and then learn how to process through that. And this is where the styles of survival come in. When the attachment system gets shaken, it doesn't just sit quietly and wait for everything to calm down. It adapts. Every person develops a way to survive the conflict between wanting closeness and fearing the pain. These aren't flaws or even personality issues, which a lot of people complain about. It doesn't mean you're broken. These are strategies that the nervous system uses to manage uncertainty, especially when things around you are in nothing but utter chaos, right? We usually talk about two broad patterns, avoidant and anxious. They sit actually on the same spectrum, just on opposite ends of how people try to stay safe. Both are rooted in protection, not pathology. Let's start with the avoidance side, because I know a lot of you out there constantly that you write in, and I love your questions. Can you do more on avoidant? I have done a few more writings, and here I want to kind of give you a little bit about that side, right? So, avoidant people protect themselves by controlling distance. They've learned, usually early in life, that closeness can come with unpredictability or emotional overload. So, when something feels intense, their system regulates by creating space. They might say, they need time to think, or they just need to shut down emotionally. They stop reaching, they stop texting, they stop showing vulnerability. It's not that they're not feeling, it's that feeling too much feels unsafe. Their body manages that threat by retreating, and they retreat into independence because dependence once meant danger. Now, on the other side of that coin is the anxious side, and that works the opposite way. When someone who's anxious is getting there and it's building inside of them, their sense of safety is threatened. So they move forward rather than away. They seek reassurance, they seek closeness, contact. It's the system's way of saying, if I can get the connection back, I'm going to feel okay. The pursuit isn't about control, it's about regulation. Their body calms through proximity. That's why when they don't get a response or they sense withdrawal, panic sets in, right? The system goes on high alert. It floods with energy to close the gap. Now, here's the deal. Both sides are doing the same thing. They're trying to avoid emotional collapse. Avoidant people regulate by pulling away. Anxious people regulate by holding on. But here's the thing. Most people have a bit of both depending on the context. No one's purely one or the other. You can be avoidant in a relationship and anxious in another. You can even switch with the same relationship depending on what's happening at any given moment. I remember working with someone who had been betrayed by a long-term partner. They told me, you know what? I'm fine. I've accepted it. I just don't care anymore. Now, on the surface, it sounded like detachment. But when we started exploring it further, they admitted to checking their ex's social media every night, then deleting the search history because they didn't want to feel pathetic. That's the avoidant and the anxious behavior happening in the same person. Their system was trying both strategies, pulling away to stay in control and then reaching out in secret to find relief. Now, when they reached out, also came with that little nugget was the shame, right? Not going to get into that one though. We've talked a lot about that before, right? What I do want you to know though is that's what makes this so very human. The system isn't consistent because it's not built for clean lines. It's built for survival. It does whatever it needs to avoid the crash. When people start to understand this, there's often a lot of shame that lifts, right? They stop asking, why am I like this? And they start seeing their reactions as learned survival skills. Avoidance strategies protect us against the overwhelming feelings. Anxious strategies protect against abandonment. Both are developed for good reasons, and both kept that person functioning through stress or anxiety. Now, the problem isn't the strategy itself, it's when it becomes rigid and automatic, or it even starts running the show when it's not needed anymore. Now, once you understand your own pattern, you can start to slow it down instead of judging it. When you notice yourself withdrawing or reaching, you need to ask, what am I trying to regulate right now? Now, that question alone starts to change the pattern and it breaks up the rhythm that you're constantly in. The hard work is learning to remember you got to ask yourself that question and being kind to yourself along the way. There's no moral hierarchy between these two styles. One isn't stronger or wiser or more self-aware than the other. They're both ways of managing fear, right? Now, the real goal isn't to become secure overnight because that's just not going to happen. But it is to build awareness so you can notice when you're moving from fear instead of choice, when the system feels safe enough, right? Both avoidance and anxiety start to soften for you. You stop chasing or running, And the big part, you start responding. That's the beginning of a secure attachment, not because the reflex disappeared, but because you learn to understand all of it before it took control. Now, this becomes the other side of this. And then I want to get into betrayal versus death and how this affects us. Because this is where a little bit this changes, right? And especially for people that sit inside of the lifestyle, losing a master or a dominant, I should say, or losing a submissive, losing our partners, or having one of them betray us with another causes and sets a lot of these things in motion, right? Now, let me make you understand here. Grief doesn't look the same for each person because not all losses hit the nervous system in the same way. The body reacts differently depending on how the attachment breaks. A betrayal and a death both create loss, right? But they trigger very different reactions inside of the same system. When someone dies, the connection ends in a very clear and physical way. Now, your body may still reach for that person. You might catch yourself turning to say something or expecting them to walk through the door, but over time, reality helps the nervous system recalibrate. There's no longer a living person for it to attach to. Eventually, your signal gets quiet, even if it never fully disappears. What stays is the longing, but it's anchored in finality. However, when we get to betrayal, now, on the other hand, that doesn't give you a clean ending at all. The attachment bond doesn't just break, it fractures. The person is still alive, they're still out there, and that keeps your system on high alert. The threat stays alive. It never dissipates. You know they're unsafe, but the body still tags them as familiar, and familiarity here feels like safety. So your system keeps trying to solve the unsolved problem. Can I make sense of this? Can I fix what broke? Can I trust again? Right? That's what makes betrayal, grief feel so disorienting. It's not just loss, it's confusion layered on loss. The person who was supposed to help you feel secure became the source of your pain, and the brain doesn't know how to categorize that. It's like a safety alarm and the attachment signal are going off at the same time. You're pulled toward and then pushed away from the same person. And both directions totally feel justified. In death grief, there's a kind of painful acceptance that eventually takes shape. The body learns that the person's gone. And while the ache stays, the search subsides. In betrayal grief, the search can drag on much longer because your system hasn't received a clear signal that the threat's over. You might see a photo, you're going to hear a song, catch a scent, and then all of a sudden, your entire system board lights up all over again. It's the body saying, they're still here. What do I do with that? That's why people recovering from betrayal describe it as a feeling stuck, right? They can't move forward. They can't stop thinking about it. Can't stop checking. But your system is trying to finish a process here that never got closure. With death, that absence is final, but with betrayal, it's ambiguous. And ambiguity keeps the attachment loop open. When I work with people, I see this difference all the time. Someone grieving over a partner who passed away. I miss them so much, but I know they're gone. I miss our walks, our talks, cuddles, everything, cooking dinner, right? But when I'm working with someone who's going through betrayal, the pattern's different. I can't stop thinking about them. I know what they did to me hurts, but, I just can't. I miss them so much. One is a conversation with your memory, and the other is a fight with reality. Understanding that distinction helps people take their shame out of the equation. You're not obsessed or weak for struggling to let it go, after the betrayal. Your body's still running on an unfinished attachment program. It's waiting for safety that never came. The only way to calm that system is through awareness, by naming what kind of grief you're actually dealing with. Now, when you recognize that betrayal grief keeps that thread alive, you stop expecting the same healing timeline as a death loss. You can't start focusing on retaining the system instead of forcing closure that doesn't exist yet. Both kinds of grief hurt, and for the same reason. The attachment bond was broken, but how that bond broke changes how your body processes the loss. Death teaches acceptance through finality. Betrayal teaches acceptance through clarity. Seeing the danger for what it was and allowing your system to stop searching for safety in the wrong place. And this is what brings me to this next part: listening without obeying. When we talk about healing, right, people often think it means shutting something down or shutting down feelings. Hell, even shutting down desire, shutting down your memory. That's not the goal. And to be quite honest with you, it's not really possible. The goal is to understand what the body is saying before you decide what to do with it. The body's job is to signal you. It tells you when you're scared, when you're lonely, when you're craving closeness. It's a communication system, not a moral compass. The trouble starts when you confuse the signal with instruction. Just because your body says, reach out doesn't mean you have to. Just because it says pull away doesn't mean you should. Listening isn't obedience, it's awareness. So when you start noticing those impulses, you begin to see what they're really trying to do. They're trying to regulate. The body's not asking for a specific person or even an outcome. It's asking to feel stable again. Sometimes it sends you towards an ex, sometimes towards a friend, sometimes into work or a distraction or a new hobby. The drive underneath is the same: find relief, find grounding. The mind's job is to interpret, not to suppress. Listening looks like catching the moment between urge and action. You feel the wave coming up. Maybe the need to text, maybe the ache to fix something, and then you pause. You don't shame the impulse, you name it. This is my body trying to regulate. This is me wanting connection because I feel unsafe right now. That small act of naming it gives you distance from the reflex. It turns reaction into observation. And people tell me all the time, well, this just sounds stupid. Why am I going to talk to myself? Because when you start naming it out loud, you start interrupting the process. You start listening and recognizing what your body's telling you, and then you've got to interpret that data. And that's what I'm talking about. And this reason, the reason here is this matters is because the attachment system runs on repetition. Every time you react automatically, you reinforce the old pattern, right? Every time you slow down and notice it, you teach your system that it can tolerate the pause. And I've talked a lot about pause in the past. I do this when I work with people. Those pauses over time get longer, and the urgency starts to ease. You're not forcing change, you're retraining your body to trust your awareness. There's something powerful in learning not to demonize the signal itself as well. Wanting connection before safety isn't a mistake, it's a reflex. The body's been doing that since you were born, crying for contact before, it even knew if it would be met. So that same instinct is still here. It just needs guidance from the part of you that can't think clearly. So when that pull starts to show up, the need to reach out, to explain, to chase, to get clarity, stop and ask yourself, what's this really about? What am I trying to regulate right now? Now, usually the answer isn't about the person. It's about the state you're in: loneliness, the fear, the confusion, the heartache. Once you identify that, you can look for another way to meet that need. Now, it could be grounding yourself, talking to someone safe, or just sitting with the discomfort long enough to let it pass. What you're doing in those moments is building integration. The body gets to speak. but the mind gets to decide. That's how connection and safety start to work together. And the truth is, connection before safety, was never a failure. It was survival. The problem isn't that your system wants closeness. It's that it hasn't learned how to slow down before acting on it. If you can understand that, and especially the difference of that, it's going to change everything. You stop fighting yourself and start working with yourself. Healing doesn't mean becoming indifferent or detached. It means being able to feel the pull for connection and still choose what's safe. It's a difference between being driven by the reflex and being guided by the awareness. And that's what growth looks like. Not silence, but steadiness. Now, I know I went a little deep today, but I think this question from this person who reached out and started this kind of 2-story arc here, to do this justice, I had to bring this here. Because there's going to be a lot of you that are going to say, I feel this, I'm working through this, I've been betrayed recently, or I've lost somebody important in my life. I'm going to share something with you all because I don't tend to share a lot of my private life. I've had recently a very close, bottom line, he grew up being family. I mean, he was just a family friend, but he was always my uncle, passed away. I said nothing when it happened because I'm not looking for sympathy. I have to learn, I process how I feel, what it meant to me. No more conversations, but I get to reflect and I have these memories and I celebrate this person's life, right? So we have to understand when we're dealing with all of this, how does this fit into our daily lives? I'm not superhuman here. I feel these things too, right? So if you can understand how to separate these things and process, I listened to when it happened. That's, I think, why last weekend this past weekend, I didn't write on a day. I think I just put up a meme because, I was processing, I was listening. What do I need to talk to myself about? Right. So I hope you can see why this topic hits really hard, right? What I wrote yesterday started as the piece, about what happens when your body wants closeness before your mind feels it's ready. But what it really opened up was a bigger truth that this pull isn't weakness or regression. It's just a part of being human. Now, after loss or betrayal, your body is doing what it's designed to do. It searches for the familiar, for something that feels steady again. And you're not broken for wanting that. Stop looking in the mirror and saying, God, I'm just so broken. Nobody's going to ever want me. It's not true. Start to equate this to a biological level because you're wired for it. The challenge here is learning to slow it down long enough to decide what kind of connection actually brings you safety and what kind just repeats the hurt. So here's what I want you to sit with this week. Here's a question I'm going to ask you. And every week I ask you guys questions and some of you respond. Others respond privately. What does your body ask for when your mind says not yet? Right? Take some time to think about that after this show. Maybe write it down. Maybe, I don't know, replay it. Maybe just notice when it shows up. Awareness is where every shift begins. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this one. If you read the writing yesterday or if this episode hit something for you, share your reflections in the comments. Send me a message, right? Talk to others in the comments, right? These discussions are what makes this community what it is and how this always helps other people. For those of you who are starting to ask me, yes, my book's out there. No, I have no nothing beyond the thought of a second book. So right now, let me just address that. No, there are no current sketches, ideas, or even titles for a new book right now. I'm just going to get that out there. But my current book, Tangled Desires, the intersection between psychology and BDSM, is out there. It's a good book. It's a repetitive book. I repeat a lot of things, a lot of citations in there. But it's wherever you can download your books from. get it, might help you out, right? But in time, if I decide, I think in the new year or when I shut down over Christmas, I'm going to spend time thinking, running some ideas. If I have anything, I'll release that at after the new year and let you all know. Because please understand, writing is very difficult. Writing a book is very, very different from, I don't know, doing a show or writing my script for the show or even doing an article for you all or even writing giving you guys a free worksheet. It's really different because I've got to compile sources. My writing's gotten better, but yeah, right. Um, we'll see. But if I'm going to do something, it's going to tie to all the work here for all of you, right? So yeah, for now, there's no more details than that. All right. It's been an interesting week as far as we're going to move to my new fun segment. Sorry, I'm taking a lot of sips of water here. Still can't shake this cough, guys. It's getting there. 4 weeks on, still kind of nursing this bronchitis. You're famous now. Lord, everyone just seems to have an opinion. So we're going to call this person President Madison because this guy decided to tell me how much, I don't know, my show sucks compared to every other show out there. Look, I don't even understand if you really hate me that much. Like if you, it's, I don't, maybe hate's the wrong word. But why would you like email somebody and then go, your show sucks, stop doing it, these other shows are better? Well, then why not just go and support them? Now, the maliciousness that comes with it, with them downgrading my show for no other reason than they just don't like me, that's just malicious. I don't do that to anybody. Why would you do it to me? If you like my content, great. If you don't, then don't listen. I'm not asking you, and you're not paying me. All right? That's sometimes where I get confused. Another thing, I have been getting some offers to have some people on the show. This is not really in the year famous now. I'll get back to that in a second. I'm not putting some people on the show because their values and mine don't align, let alone they don't align with the community. There's plenty of podcasts out there that are willing to have guests. It's not that I'm not selective. It's just I want them to reflect what we're talking about here: emotions, psychology, mental health, right? The community, relationships. These are the things that we wrestle with every day, right? So, um, yeah, it's I'm just being really, pardon me. I'm just being really selective. To the final person that I'm going to put on blast here for your famous now, we're going to call you. Uh, we're going to call you the blanket wrap. I don't know. I'm trying to be polite. This person found out on my profile that I used to work in law enforcement. And let me tell you, I've never seen some of the most disgusting comments I've ever received, let alone then they said stuff about the military. Look, I proudly served. I continue to serve today in a different capacity because I work with veterans globally around the world, and I do that work 5 days a week, 15 hours a week for free is what I do it for. I work in partnership with a group that helps veterans from different countries. I love that. It's my passion. Okay? But if you hate cops, if you hate the military, better start to remember that these are the people who risk their day, their lives every day protecting you from people who literally want to cause you harm. I'm not saying all of them are great. I know I've worked with bad people in a lot of different professions. But for the most part, people are just out there trying to support, take care of their communities, do the right thing. I am always going to stand behind law enforcement because I've been there. Because most of you have no idea what the type of work is. It's not about go out and become and understand, or I'm not here to change your ideas. You don't like cops, that's fine. But lawlessness and all that stuff doesn't work. And I'm not going to get political here because I'm not going to talk about, I don't care what happens around the world and I don't care what happens back home. But if you are going to harm people that are doing their jobs, you're just hating on them because you have no idea why some of these kids join the military. I met some really nice kids that, they were trying to get out of a life of poverty, or they didn't want to join a gang, so they joined the military, right? They were worried they were going to end up dead before they hit 19. They wanted a better life for themselves. So they went out, they got educated, they got discipline, they got a career. So when you are telling me these disgusting things, all I can say is I fought for your right to be an insufferable bitch. That's right. That's what I fought for. Thank you for telling me your disgusting thoughts. Now I can't block you from my show because if I could, I would. But you can't comment on my writings anymore unless you make another account. I don't know what hurt you in your past, but you really should seek out some healing for that. And I'm really sorry for whatever you've gone through, but it's not my fault. It's not the majority of people in the military or law enforcement problem what's happened to you. But yeah. Okay. If you email me about hatred and you start hating on either one of those professions, I'm probably not going to listen. You have a right to it, but you don't have to tell me any of that stuff because I'm not going to listen. But if you hate on me for it or you hate on those and try to tell me about it, I'm not going to listen either. That's my right. You don't get to control that. So to that person, best of luck to you. But my God, you are insufferable. And thank God I never have to hear from you again. It's the most disgusting email to date. And that person has been reported, yes, on social media. On a couple of different platforms, actually. Instagram and Fetlife. Anyway. Back to the main part. I'm going to thank this person who emailed me, who brought this topic forward, who made me think about what's going on and how this is affecting a much bigger sense of people. And I hope that discussing grief and attachment and how they are so intertwined brings a little bit more light to the subject for you. I hope you find some healing in it. And so you'll always know, I'm always here to listen, right? And in a limited way, but I'm here. Okay? To the rest of you, I hope you got something for this. Let me know in the socials and comments below. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay cute.